score and a business mentor. I'm going to be your host today, and our presenter today is Dr. Don Wetmore. More on Don in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE, we have 320 offices and 11,000 volunteers across the country, and we're part of the Small Business Administration of the federal government. And right here locally, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer 3 primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling, and that can either be face-to-face, by telephone, email, or video. And if you would like to have free counseling, you can click that link on the screen there and get a SCORE mentor, or you can go to our website and click the button on our website, Request a Mentor. Secondly, we offer a wide range of educational workshops and webinars, actually over 150 per year. And lastly, we have extensive resources on our website, including access to a network of subject matter experts. Our next webinar is going to be 2 weeks from today on November the 19th at 12 noon. And the topic is Marketing the E-commerce Business, and Cliff Benico will be presenting. And you can find more specifics on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Just some useful information about today's webinar. We have set aside time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, there is a chat button at the bottom of your screen. And please use the chat button, not the Q&A button. And you could submit your question at any time during the presentation, and we're going to leave about 10 minutes at the end, and Don will address those for us. We will end the webinar sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and there's going to be a link to the recording, and you'll be able to access the recording along with the slide materials on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, within the next 48 hours. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Don Wetmore. Don Wetmore is a certified executive coach and the author of 8 books, including Beat the Clock, Organizing Your Life, the Productivity Handbook. He has made over 2,000 domestic and international speaking presentations to more than 100,000 people, sharing his unique personal productivity principles and tools that he has created to get more done in less time. I'll now turn it over to Don. Don, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, SCORE, for inviting me, and thank you all for joining me, taking some time out of your busy schedule to spend an hour here. And we're going to be talking about something really important, and that's you, and how literally you can get a 26-hour day. And I'm sure you know that I can't deliver that in reality, but I can give it to the equivalent of showing you how to work smarter rather than working harder. And I know when I start these programs, and I appreciate Bob's introduction, folks often ask, what's a nice guy like you, Don, doing in this business of sharing this information? And just briefly, I've had 3 full-time careers in my adult life. Been a full-time practicing attorney and a full-time entrepreneur. Started 25 different businesses. Some of them actually turned out to be for-profit corporations, although some didn't turn out. You learn a lot by doing that. But I was also a college professor and was on the faculty at Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry, New York. And that's how I got into this business. It was about 25 years ago that my boss, my department chair, asked me to put together a program on time management for our students. You know, these are kids that are getting out with degrees in business and management, but nobody's ever taught them how to manage their most precious resource. So I was flattered to be asked, and I got the program together. And unfortunately, it didn't run because there was no budget available. So I just started doing this training on my own. And I really believe that if you do the things you love the most, everything seems to fall into place. So anyway, long story short, this is my day job. I've been doing these programs for the last 25 years, do a little bit of law practice, a little bit of adjunct teaching, but this is where my heart and soul is. And I'll tell you, this is the highlight of my day when I have the good fortune of being able to share this information with y'all who's listening on this program. So let's get into it. We got a ton of stuff to do. I hope you'll take lots and lots of notes. And let's jump right into it. One of the things that I discovered early on when I was putting my programs together is that huge increases in our productivity do not require huge increases of time, effort, and energy. See, I've got a great job. In fact, I think I got the best job in the world. I don't fix broke people. As Bob mentioned, I've trained over 100,000 people over the years. I've been blessed with that. And I get to work with the most productive people around, okay? And I'm sure this is true for everybody who's on this call, okay? You're not signing up for this because you're totally out of control and everything. You're all very productive. That's not the issue. The issue is really how much more productive can we be? And in our time together, I'll share some examples on how to increase your productivity, not by making wholesale changes, but just making small little adjustments. In fact, I wrote an article on this topic called Time Management Horse Sense. And I'll give you my contact information later on if you'd like a copy of it. And it's a very simple concept. In a horse race, the first horse gets a purse of, let's say, $50,000. The second horse gets a purse of $25,000. The question I pose in the article is, why do we give the first horse twice as much money as the second horse? Does the first horse have to run twice as far, twice as fast? Of course not. The first horse only has to be a nose ahead of the competition. And that's a wonderful metaphor to keep in mind as we think of our own success. Quantum leaps in our productivity, both on and off the job, do not require quantum leaps of time, effort, and energy. What I tell my clients, my students, do what you're doing the way you do it, because that's brought you to where you are, and make a small little change over here, small little change over here that moves you a nose ahead. And I'll give you some good concrete examples as we go through our material here this afternoon. One of the other things that I discovered when I was putting this program together, because I went around and I did a lot of interviewing, asking folks, well, where do you fit on the productivity scale? How would you rate your productivity on a scale of 1 to 10? And what are some of the issues keeping you from being at a higher number? And one of the things that really struck me is that all of life's challenges and opportunities seem to fall within 7 identifiable areas. And it's something I've labeled as the 7 vital areas of life. And let me just share with you just a word or two about the importance of each and how it relates to the big picture of managing our time. And the first one on my list is health. And I think that's the one that we value the least until what happens, until we don't have it anymore. This year in this country, there's going to be about 2.5 million deaths, and 2/3 of them are going to be from self-inflicted causes. Oh my goodness, Don, you're thinking, I didn't realize the suicide rate was that high. Well, it really isn't from suicide, but you take a look at the 5 leading causes of adult deaths. While not 100% preventable, they're mostly preventable. The number 1 cause of adult deaths in our culture is heart disease. Nearly 600,000 people, according to the CDC. And yet you talk to any cardiologist and they'll tell you that most of the heart patients, they're doing it to themselves. Because where does that come from? The heart disease, it comes from lack of exercise, poor diet, smoking, and yes, some of it's environmental, some of it's hereditary, but most, 2/3, as the cardiologist will tell you, it's what we're failing to do, followed by some of these other causes. And look, as a starting point to our discussion today, if time management is going to mean anything, it's focusing in on maybe doing some things now, taking some time now, that'll increase the likelihood of more time to manage at the end. How's that for a good proposition, huh? Number 2 in this list of the 7 vital areas I found is our family dimension. I think everybody I speak to, they seem to want to have more time with family and more quality time with family. This year in this country, there's going to be about 2 million marriages. They're nice, that's really nice, And there's going to be about 1 million divorces. And based upon that ratio, the divorce rate runs at about 50% current divorces current marriages. And not only that, but up here in the Northeast where we're all located, the divorce rate in some pockets is as high as 85%. And I've as an attorney, I've been involved in over 200 divorces over the years. And what I've discovered is the number 1 cause of relationship breakup. And this is true not only for romantic relationships, but work relationships, business partners, and all of that. The number 1 reason that these relationships fall apart is a lack of communication. The American Management Association tells us that the average working professional spends less than 2 minutes a day in meaningful communication with their spouse or significant other. And I don't know about you, but I can't get my story out in 2 minutes a day, let alone hear what my wife Nancy did in her day. And not only that, but in the same study, it tells us that the average working professional will spend as little as 30 seconds a day in meaningful communication with their children. And that's just a little bit more than, hey, how was school today, son? Yeah, okay, yeah. Did you have homework? Yeah, okay, go do it. We'll talk tomorrow. Nice chat. Huh? Now we go back in time, and there's that young couple standing at the altar, and they pledge one to the other. And I think they're sincere. I think most would agree with that. But as they stand there, 3, 5, 15, 20 years out, they're going to be running to attorneys, taking the fruits of their productivity and paying for a mistake that could have been avoided in the first place. A lot of what time management is not only about what we are doing, our to-do list, but we should have a not to-do list as well. And we should not ignore the communication in developing those relationships. I have a buddy of mine, by the way, his name is Doug. He's a contractor. He works 9 days a week. Do you believe that, man? I mean, he's got no time for anything else. And he's got a couple of kids, his wife and all this sort of thing. No time for hobbies. And the power went out in his house here. He's telling me about this last week. I said, what happened? He said, well, the power was out for about 2 hours. I said, what did you do? He said, I couldn't do anything. It was dark. My phone was dead. I couldn't get online. I said, so what did you do for 2 hours? Well, he says, I talked to my wife a little bit. I said, what about that? He says, well, she seems like an interesting person. Number 3 is our financial dimension. That's a true story, by the way. And this is the one that for most people, we spend most of our time, the big chunk of our time. And we all have 24 hours in the day, 7 days in the week. You all do that, of course. And if you multiply that out, if my math is correct, and I suspect it is because I've done it before, we've all got 168 hours. And take out a factor for sleep. Let's go 8 hours a night, 7 nights a week. And I know that might be high for some and low for others. We're a sleep-deprived culture. But that leaves us, 100, 110, 112 hours to do all the things that we need. And if we now take out a factor for the production of our financial results, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, we work longer than anybody else on the planet. We've recently taken that title away from either the Japanese or the South Koreans. The average American full-time job is working 45 hours a week. But then you have to add on commuting time and preparation time. So 45 is really 55. And here's my point. We spend, on average, 50% of our waking hours to make a living. And I mean, that's a criticism, but simply as an observation. But here's another thing that I discovered. In addition to making just small changes to improve our productivity, there's very little correlation between the quantity of time that we put in on anything in any of these different dimensions in life and what the output is over here. And I'm not saying no correlation. We do have to put in some amount of time, okay? And let's use the financial dimension as my example and why I really believe so deeply in this. Earnings levels in this world range anywhere from, well, do nothing, you make 0, okay? Or on the flip side, way on the other side, billions, okay? And Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates and all of those folks. I don't know these folks. I only know what I read in the media about them. And so I'm kind of wrestling this over time. Well, how do we account for that? How is it that some of these folks are making billions times more than the average bear, if you will? And I thought initially, well, maybe they've got billions times more time. That's ridiculous. Everybody has the same amount of time. And then I thought, well, they're smarter, and clearly, and I'm sure they are. But billions times smarter? I don't think so. And I found the answer though. They make billions times more than the average bear, not because they spend any more time, they just spend their time differently. One of the books I'm working on, I hope to get out if I stop procrastinating, is going to be entitled, You Gotta Talk to the Muffin Man. And it relates to this whole principle. And I come into the office here at SCORE, and I've got this beautiful tray of blueberry muffins, and I'm sharing the recipe with Bob. And Elliot's over here, and he's not paying attention to it. The conversation is directed to Bob, but Elliot only picks up bits and pieces of my recipe and goes home and tries to duplicate, but he doesn't have the full recipe, and he throws up his hands and he says, if I only have what Don had, I can make those beautiful muffins. There's nothing wrong with his kitchen, it's just he doesn't have the right ingredients. So the key to extraordinary success is to talk to the muffin man. Find somebody who's already achieved the goal that you want and ask them how they're using their time. Find out what the recipe, and to the extent that you can duplicate that, you can begin to produce a similar result. Number 4 is our intellectual component. You know, the rules up until, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, you came into this world, as a young person, you learned a skill, a trade, a profession, you learned how to. And that pretty much served you for a lifetime. Things didn't change very much. Today, if you and I doing what we're doing in all of our different dimensions, if we fail to continue to improve, there's a good likelihood that within a matter of a few years that every one of us could be obsolete. And so we have another time management responsibility, like you didn't have enough to begin with when we started this call. I recommend you've got to spend some time and budget some time for self-improvement time, because there's no standing still. You're either moving ahead or falling behind. And I use 2% as my number. That comes out to about 12 training days per year. And I actually put it into my calendar to go to seminars, workshops, and the like to help me in my profession. A good source of information for self-improvement, for career advancement, is joining your professional association. And there's zillions of them for any and all professions, and legal secretaries, business law teachers, realtors, and on the list goes. And a wonderful source in order to get that self-improvement and to source out some really talented muffin men and women is right here at SCORE. And I hope you're taking advantage of that. Number 5 is our social dimension. How important is that? And if you didn't believe in that, everybody'd be living in the woods somewhere up in the mountains. And number 6, I found things fall into the professional area, and that's a little different than the financial area. Although what we do for professional reasons, we do for financial reasons. The professional reason dimension talks about our inner satisfaction, that at the end of the day, it's not just the paycheck and the benefits, which is important, of course, but we feel that we've made a difference. We put some footprints in the sand. And then the final dimension is our spiritual dimension. And I'm not getting into particular religious preferences. And I do know that studies show that a fairly substantial majority of people in the country affiliate with some form of organized religion. But when I'm talking the spiritual area, it's a little bit beyond that. It's not just religion. It's our relationships to one another, to our environment, to our community, and so on. Now, can you imagine one day, and I do this every night when I go off to bed and I put my head on the pillow and I go through a mental summary of the 7 vital areas and just rank my performance on a scale of 1 to 10. And imagine every one of those was a 10 by your own estimation. Yeah, you had a lot of stuff to do, but you managed to go to the gym got the exercise, and you managed to spend some time with your daughter, helping her with homework, and you had a lot on your plate, and you still found time to speak with a financial planner, and you got to do some independent reading, and every one of those was a 10. You had one super duper day, didn't you? and the question comes up, well, did you have any problems during the day? Of course you did. You know, in sales, you thought you're going to make a great set, fell apart. Your son brought home a disappointing report card. Some guy cut you off in traffic out there in 95. Of course, you had a lot of disappointments, but you still had a super duper day. So the foundation, it seems to me, of good time management, it begins with these 7 vital areas. And like any building that doesn't have a secure foundation, it's going to make the upper structure unsteady. So look what happens if you mess up on any one of these, never mind 2 and 3. And just on the issue of health, for example, 3 out of 4 people complain on a regular basis they're flat out tired. And if you're flat out tired, it's going to impact on your family life, your ability to focus on your professional responsibilities, and so on. Well, let's say things aren't going well for you financially. It's going to hurt your mental health. It's going to hurt your social life. So the idea of time management is more than just making up a to-do list. That's an important tool. The idea of time management starts with making sure that we create balance in our lives to begin with. Sort of gives us kind of a new focus then on time management. A lot of people think it's, well, it's just making up a to-do list and prioritize. And that's an important skill. To me, time management is really the art, the science, the practice of gaining better control over the entire 24 hours. Because here's another secret. Everybody you come in contact with 24/7 has a better idea about how you're to spend your time than you. And it doesn't make the world a bad place. It's just the way it is. If there's a void of leadership in your time management life, a lot of people are going to step in front of the parade. So to me, personal productivity and time management is the idea of gaining better control, not absolute control. I don't want any of you leaving this session all type A and freaky and crazy and worse than you are now, but getting better control over the entire 24 hours so that we can play it out in a way that's going to create that balance in those 7 vital areas. And what do we get as a payoff? Well, the good feelings of physical health and the good feelings of mental health. What a winning combination. All right. A little bit of a foundation. Let's talk about some really good specific stuff now. And I want to share with you the idea of the concept that I relate back to Alice in Wonderland. And you all remember the story of Alice in Wonderland, and she's down in the rabbit hole, and she comes to a crossroads, and she doesn't know to go left or right. And up in the tree is this big smiling Cheshire cat, and she asks for some direction. And she says, I don't know which way to go. Do I go left? Do I go right? And the cat, if you recall, asks Alice a very poignant question. The cat asks Alice, well, where do you want to go? What's your destination? And Alice says, I don't know. And then the cat says, well, then take either road. What difference does it make what road you're on if you don't know where you're going? You never know when you get there. You see, I don't think that there's any intrinsic reward or reward unto itself in doing anything in life unless it's meaningful and important to you, unless it relates back to your 7 vital areas. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of be a permanent homework assignment now to build on the foundation of the 7 vital areas. I want you to think about writing the book of your life backwards, sort of creating your bucket list, if you will, and looking at those 7 vital areas and asking yourself, on the last day of my life, excuse me, on the last day of my life, what do I want to be able to say about my health life? On the last day of my life, what would I like to say about my family life, my financial life, each one of those 7 vital areas? And not where you think life is going to take you. No, if there was a genie that can come and appear before you and wave the wand, what would the answer to that be? And it's kind of a scary assignment, okay? But here's the idea. Once you've created that book of life, once you've figured out where the destinations are, then you start to work your way backwards to figure out now, what have I got to do this year, this month, and this week, and literally this day in order to get there? Because the bragging rights don't come to us based on what we do the last 3 days of our lives. It's what we're doing every single day of our lives. And then the choices on how you spend your time going forward, it becomes almost a no-brainer when you know where you're going. Because as I've gone through this process myself, I've created this book of life and my bucket list, if you will. And then I've worked my way back to figure out what do I have to do and what do I want to do in order to get there. And that makes my to-do list. And then each night I set aside some time for daily planning. Daily planning is taking control of the most precious resource at our command, which is the next 24 hours. And I like to sit down and spend 15 or 20 minutes and take a look at my book of life and take a look at all the things that I have to do and all the things that I want to do. And I build in my to-do list for the next day. And I've got a list that probably has 80 and 90 different items, have to items and want to items. That's probably less than many of you have. And it doesn't matter how many we have, but the truth of the matter is we can never get it all done. And I don't want to have a whole list of 80 or 90 items because I'd be overwhelmed with that. So when I plan my to-do list for the next day, I'm pulling out of my inventory that I have of things that I might do over the next 90 days. I want to build in a list of items in my to-do list where I overplan my day a little bit, but I don't overplan my day. Typically, I find my to-do list, I can comfortably get maybe 8 or 10 items, and I'll build in maybe 10 or 15 items. So a little over planning it, so it creates a healthy sense of pressure on me. And I like to do the planning at night so that when I go to bed at night, I've got my itinerary laid out for the next day. And it's interesting how that does have a positive effect on our sleep. A lot of people don't get a good night's sleep because they don't have anything planned and they're kind of tossing and turning. What am I going to do about this tomorrow? What do I do about that tomorrow? And they don't get that deep, nutritious sleep that's so important to their body's refreshment. Well, when I've got my to-do list of maybe 10 or 15 items, okay, I can't get them all done at the same time, but I get them done one at a time. So I need a system to kind of triage and prioritize. And I just use a very simple A, B, C, D system with a little dot or a star. A means crucial. It's the things that are going to really help me to put the cheese on the pizza, hit the home run, if you will, or but really are going to get me to where I need to go. B means important. If I had a choice between an A or a B, I'd obviously want to work on the A. C means minimal value. Chances are I won't get to my C's today, but that's okay because everything else will have more value. And a D means no value at all. And you say, well, how would I wind up with a D on my list? Well, it's interesting. As you go through this process and you and list the items that you have to do, all the items that you want to do, and then go back and value them in terms of their importance, you may find that you've been carrying some D's around, and what a good thing that is to throw those off the list. And then the final symbol is a little dot or a star, and that stands for a quickie item. I need to make a phone call or file something or read a quick review or something. It's only going to take me about 2 minutes to do it, 3 minutes maybe. For me to sit there and say, well, let's see, is that an A? No, that's a B. Well, it could be a C. By the time I figure out what the thing is, I can have the darn thing done. And so I typically have 2 or 3 quickie items in my day. And I'll do those things first thing in the morning, so it gives me kind of a quick start during the day. A lot of people I talk about have a financial budget, and for good reason, because for most of us, we don't have unlimited wealth. And we don't want to run out of food on Thursday and not be able to buy bread on Friday. And so let's look at our time, because I think if we look at time versus money, what's a more precious resource? Well, I think for most of us, it's our time. And the way in which we use our time is how we develop the money that we have. So let's look in terms of sort of a financial budget. Let's apply this to a time budget. And I do this on a weekly basis. I sit down on Sunday, I look ahead, and I say to myself, Dawn, and I talk to myself. It drives my wife crazy, and that's probably why I do it. I say, Dawn, you got 168 hours coming up this week. Don't let my wife know about this recording, okay? I shouldn't have said that, okay? You mean this is being recorded? Okay. Don, you got 168 hours coming up, and you're going to take some taxes out, 56 hours. That's for the sleep and taxes. So you're going to be left with $112 or 112 hours for the week. Okay. Well, all right, Don, that makes sense. So what am I supposed to do about it? Don, I want you to budget this out. What do you mean, Don? 1 week from today, next Sunday, when all has been said and done, the horse is out of the barn, the bell has been rung, there's no going back, because the thing about time, you can only spend it, you can't save it. Wouldn't that be nice, though? How about this? How about that rollover minutes? I didn't use Thursday, and I can put, wouldn't that be great? We can't do that, okay? So next Sunday, when it's all said and done, okay, what do you want to say? How much time do you want to say that you spent on the issue of health, the first one of the 7 vital areas? And Don, you get a range of anywhere from 0 to 168. Well, I don't want to, I can't say 168. I agree. Yeah, I got to take out time for sleep. Don, do you want to say 0? No, I don't want to say 0. Well, how much time do you want to say? And for me, it comes out to about 12 hours a week. And part of my daily routine, and this is in addition just the regular stuff, I've got to eat health-wise, I got to brush my teeth, take a shower and all that. But over and above that, I want to make sure that I'm spending about an hour and a half day on physical development. I walk for an hour every morning. I do some other things. Okay, so that comes out to roughly about 12 hours in a week. Okay, so I'm done, right? No, Don, you're not done. Why? What do you want me to do? I want you to open up your planner. You do it on your phone. You got a paper planner here, a calendar. All right. Now go to Monday, tomorrow. Okay. There are 24 days there. Where's the hour and a half going to come from? You're asking me to put an appointment to myself to go out for a walk? That sounds silly. It's no sillier than saying I'm going to do it and you don't do it. That's what the silly part is. All right, so I'm going to, and I actually do, and of course you can't see it here on the teleseminar here, but I'm showing to the guys here. I actually have an appointment to myself here. And all right, so I'm done. No, put it down on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Just write it all out. See, there's only one way to get time is you got to take the time. Okay, this has been a good exercise. Thank you. No, we're not done. What do you mean we're not? What's the second of the 7 vital areas? It's family. How much time at the end of next week do you want to say you spent in family, other than over and above getting up, give your wife a kiss in the morning, and so on. And we are blessed with 4 wonderful children. They're married. They have blessed us with 11 grandchildren. Our kids are like rabbits. It's wonderful, so a lot of family time and so that number's, I've got to pick up a number, okay, and then I got to schedule it. And Wednesday night is pizza hut night for our family and those kinds of things. And a lot of what time management is all about is just simply becoming intentional about it and taking the time and scheduling it in. But going back to Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going in the first place, what difference does it make what you're doing? Because good time management and personal productivity is not doing the wrong things quicker, because that just gets us nowhere faster. And then I conclude that whole thing with each one of those 7 vital areas and actually schedule out those things so that I budgeted that time during the week to accomplish those things. One of the things that takes away, and we'll spend a little bit of time about the time management thieves that rob us of our personal productivity opportunity. But one of the things I've come across that really can keep us from being productive and implementing all of the things that we've talked about so far. And that's what I've labeled as the insoluble problem loop. We all have problems all over the day in and day out. You can say they're challenges or different ways of looking at it, but situations that need to be dealt with, okay? And what's interesting is nature is not so cruel as to give us problems without corresponding solutions. And every problem lends itself to one of 3 solutions. Number 1 is you can fix it. Number 2, you can accept it or tolerate it. Or number 3, you can leave it. As an attorney, I mentioned I've been involved in over 200 divorces over the years, and it's interesting. Thinking about this a while back, out of the 200, I never represented the party who was at fault. I mean, think about that. The statistical, I always got the good guy or gal. Yeah, it was really, really good. Yeah. You don't know what it's like living with that woman. I say, yeah, you're a real prince. That sort of thing. But Mr. Time Management, I can't help myself. So a client comes in and she's seeking my advice as to help her through the court proceeding to get a divorce, okay? And she's really coming for solution number 3. She wants to leave it, right? Well, Mr. Time Management, I can't resist the temptation to put my time management hat on. And I get into my little discussion about the problems that all problems have 3 solutions, and why do relationships break up? 95% of the time, it's a lack of communication. And have you really considered trying to fix this and put it together? Because I really believe most people get together for the right reasons, and they fall apart because they don't attend to some of the things they should be attending to and maintaining that communication. Are you open to maybe fixing it? Most will say no. They want solution 3, and so we move forward. But maybe 20% of the clients, well, what do you have in mind? And I go through this explaining why the relationships break up. And let's think in terms of trying to rebuild that relationship. Are you interested? And if they say yes, I put together a whole packet of information where they can do some role playing and scheduling of communication back and forth. And why don't you try that and work on that for the next 30 or 60 days and come back and see if we can't maybe put this thing back together, and that's a better solution. She comes back a month from now and says, you know what? I was really skeptical when I walked out of here, and my husband, when I brought this up, he thought this was a bunch of nonsense. But you know what? We got into it, and it is kind of fun, and we got date night going, And you know something, we're not 100%, but I think we're going to put this thing back together. How much do I owe you? Here's a check, and that's the end. Or she comes back at the end of a month and says, I'm sorry, my husband won't have anything to do with this. He says it's just total BS, and you need two people to communicate. So what else can I do? I said, well, now we can go to solution number 2. You can accept it. You know, it is what it is. Or you tolerate, accept it sort of means I can embrace that person with their warts and bumps and bruises, okay, and accept who they are. Tolerate it means maybe I can't quite hug them, but I can hold my nose, but either way, I'm okay. And are you interested in pursuing that? And if the client says yes, I said, well, here's what I did. I put together a little exercise, and a really simple exercise, kind of like make a T account on a pad of paper, and over to the left, put down pros, on the right, put down cons, and make a list and work on this for the next couple of months. And for the initial exercise, you're going to probably focus on the con side because that's where your head is right now, the negative stuff. But remember all the good things, and then like a scale, see if it balances out. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has got their own deficiencies. And is it enough that you can accept it? Comes back in a month, she says, wow, you know, yeah, he drinks too much, he smokes, he spends the money or whatever, but he's a good Joe. He's good with the kids. We have a history. I think I can make this thing. I can accept it. I can tolerate it. Fine, it's over and done. Or she comes back and says, no, you know something, on analysis, I am not going to live like this. I am not going to be this man's doormat for the rest of my life. What can I do? And I said, well, we're down to number 3, which is what you came for in the first place. All right. Now, here's where the insoluble problem comes in, though. So she says, well, you mean I got to go in court and testify? Well, yeah, that means I got to pay more. Well, yeah. Well, I don't want to do that. You know, he's got to change his behavior. Well, you've already been down that road. He's not going to change his behavior. You can tolerate it. Well, I can't tolerate it. I'm not going to be his doormat for everything else. And everything. Then you got to go to court. Well, I don't want to go to court. And it goes around and around and around. And as long as you're in that insoluble problem loop, it's draining of your time. The only way to deal with the problem is to resolve it one way or the other and put it behind you. And I don't mean something as serious as a relationship breakup. You're going to go bing, 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 1, 2, 3, fix, and leave, and it's done. You'll want to give it good consideration and adequate consideration. But somewhere along the line, you got to get off the dime and move, because that problem just continues to own you and keeps you from doing the other productive things that you need. Another thief of time management is crisis management. Crisis management is where the deadline is snuck up upon you and it's robbed you of all choice. I remember when I was teaching the undergraduate division, I would always have a term paper assignment due midterm. And without failure, every single semester, at least one student would come to me and say, Professor, I'm sorry, here's my, I didn't have time to do a good enough job. You know, I didn't have time to do it, okay? And I'd always say to the student, look, when are you gonna have time in the future to redo it? Because you know I'm gonna make you redo it if it isn't good. You don't have time to do a good job now, you're gonna have the time to do it in the future. What kind of craziness is that, you know? And crisis management is poor time management, because you're up against the deadline. The stress level builds up, things are slipping through the cracks, you're often having to go back and repeat things. I think it was Henry Ford who suggested that the best way to deal with, he said that a problem well defined is 95% solved. You've got a really good handle on what the problem is. The solution is often the easy part. And to help us to do that, my recommendation is to prepare a crisis management log. Nothing fancy about it all. Just get a pad of paper, put down a column for date, another column for remarks, lug it around you for the next month or so. And every time you find yourself in a crisis, go ahead and deal with it, put it behind you, resolve the problem, but log it in so that you don't have to remember all of this stuff. You won't remember if you don't know, put it all down. And after about a month or so, maybe you got page after page, but that's okay. The more, the better. Take a look at all of the crises you found yourself in the last month or so. Ask yourselves which one of those were in your control, because some things are not within our control. Stuff happens. I mean, that's life, okay? But a lot of it may have to do with the things that we're neglecting to do. And then start to take corrective action to bring some of those crises back into control, so that you don't have those thieves robbing your time. Here's another technique that a very, very powerful technique. It's the notion of setting aside 1 hour a day of, we're going to call it me time, but for a very specific purpose. If you can set aside 1 hour a day, in as little as 3 to 4 or 5 years, you can become recognized as a world-class expert in a topic of your choice. And I know this is true in my own experience, and it's in so many of the clients that I shared this with, okay? Finding a time in your day where you're doing some low value in terms of productivity time, and substituting it for focusing in on becoming a world-class expert in the topic of your choice. And I'll tell you, a good time to do it is maybe taking a look at how much time you're spending online, how much time you're spending in front of the TV. I forget what the exact number is, maybe 10 million people, something like that. Each night, 7:30, going to be sitting in front of the tube watching Wheel of Fortune. And I got nothing against that. My wife and I will watch it from time to time. And because this is a recording, I'm going to say, yes, she does a better job in solving the puzzles than I do. Nothing wrong with doing that. But here's my point. If that's not really, fulfilling in terms of productivity, you might want to consider making a change. And maybe that's your hour of me time, okay? And you sit down and you spend just an hour a day reading, talking to the muffin men and women, maybe taking courses online, listening to podcasts, or there's any number of ways of figuring it out. It starts off with, what kind of an expert do you want to be? You want to be an expert in sales or marketing or management or entrepreneurship or whatever it is you want to do, but 1 hour a day, 50 weeks out of the year, because I want you to have a vacation. That's 350 hours of me time per year. The average college course and undergraduate class is contact hours about 35 hours a week. That's 10 classes. Forgetting the homework and forgetting commuting, you're a full-time student. You can give yourself a bachelor's degree in as little as 3 to 5 years. 1 hour a day of focused attention and study. Small changes that make a big difference. Keep the other 23 hours the same. Just change the direction of that 1 hour to make a huge increase down the road. A couple of the other thieves that we can chat about. When I was in college, my roommate Jay, we were business students. He loved books. He'd go out every Saturday, buy a new business book. Peter Drucker on management and Tom Peters on this and whatever, and had a bookcase over above his desk in the dorm room, and he'd take a step back to see where that book should fit in just ideally. And one time he had all the books on the floor and he was dusting them, putting them back alphabetically by subject matter. And in the 2 or 3 years we were roommates, he never read a book. And he suffered from the option paralysis that Albert Einstein talks about, of just too many choices. Well, maybe I could read this. And I swear, if there was a law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at the time that said you are not permitted to buy book number 2 until you read book number 1, he'd have read a lot of books, but he had too many things to do. And this goes back to the idea when you set up your to-do list. It is important to overplan your day a little bit to create a healthy sense of pressure. But if you overplan your day, it just becomes self-defeating. Part of the thieves are our own phrases that we use, the language we use, and one of the phrases that really robs of our time is that phrase, someday I'll go back to school, someday I'll start my business, someday I'll whatever. Someday I'll is the excuse we use to postpone from today the things that we truly want to do in our heart of hearts to a time in the future when you're probably never going to do it. It's almost like a destination, isn't it? Someday this island out in the mid-Pacific. Right now, see, I got a lot of humps in my day, man. I don't know about you. I got a lot of stuff I want to do, but I just don't have the time right now. But as soon as I get over the hump, what's going to happen? There's going to be another hump. But as soon as I get over the hump, I convince myself that I'm going to go to the travel agent, I'm going to buy this ticket and fly out to Someday Isle. And I'll come off the gangway and they'll put a flower lei around my neck, kiss me on both cheeks, and look, all the books I meant to read, all my gardening tools, as if that were the case. And I'll tell you something, if you go to the travel agent, they'll sell you a ticket. And you're not going to be alone, because there's a lot of people out there that buy into this philosophy of Someday Isle, postponing to a day that'll never come. But here's a travel tip. Don't buy a round trip ticket to Someday Isle. You don't need it. You only need a one-way ticket, because the plane always crashes in the sea of regret. There is no Someday Isle. I had a student of mine ask me one time, he's a sales guy, and his pride and joy was a little 4-year-old boy. And he was looking at the summer coming up, and he said, my A1 most important goal in life is I want to take my 4-year-old on vacation this summer. He says, knowing what you know about me, Don, and your background, what's your best advice? I can make sure that I take my 4-year-old on vacation. I thought about that for a moment, and I said, you take him when he's 4 years old. I don't want to make this stuff complex, friends. I mean, if you don't take a 4-year-old on vacation, you don't get a second shot of that. You can take a 5-year-old and that's good, but you're not going to go back into rewind. There's only one way to tell your 7-year-old mother that you love her. You got to tell her when she's 7 years old. Here's another one. We hear this all the time, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. Someday I keep saying that to myself. And I didn't have the time to, right? And we fill in the blank. I didn't have time to read my book. I didn't have my time to whatever, okay? And whenever somebody says that to me, I come back and I say, well, let me ask you, did you brush your teeth today? Well, yeah, I did, of course. Did you eat? Yeah, I don't want to be hungry. Did you get dressed? Of course I did, but I had to do those things. No, you didn't. Now, if you didn't, there are consequences. You're all stinky and nobody wants to sit with you, but you chose to do that, okay? When you say, I didn't have time, and you fill in the blank, what you're suggesting is that universe yesterday, if it only gave me 1 extra hour, 24-hour day, I could have read my book, but it only gave me 24 hours. And that's ludicrous. And it's ludicrous for this reason, too, because there are 7 billion people on the planet. And I dare say there was a few people who read a book last night, and they all had the same 24 hours. And if somebody read a book, it proved that the time was available. So my suggestion is this. One is, if you're not getting it done, schedule it. We've talked about that. But if you didn't read the book, don't blame and make yourself a victim, because you're not. It's the way in which you're failing to spend your time, or the choices you're making or allowing others to make for you. You simply say, I chose not to read my book last night. And you have every right to do it because it's your life. And then one final thought is just, let's look at social media. And there's all kinds of studies on this that with teenagers, I find frightening, where they're spending up to 12 hours a day in front of some form of social media and YouTubes and all of that sort of thing. And they're spending a fraction of that in front of a school teacher and so on. But even for grown-ups and so forth, there are many surveys out there, but easily we're spending at least a couple of hours a day on average. Averages are made up of extremes, okay, on social media, on all the different things. And I'd ask you to kind of take a look at that. And it does serve a purpose. Entertainment value, all of that stuff. We're not robots, but kind of keep a track of how much time you're spending on that. And that's a huge way, an easy way to maybe just cut it back a little bit. And it isn't just a minute. And I was working with a group of millennials, there's 30 of them, and they're financial analysts. And they all got their phones and all that, and they check their social media, my Twitter feed or whatever. But it's only going to take a minute, they say in their mind. Okay, and I get that. Well, it really doesn't. We did studies on it. It takes 5 minutes. But it takes 5 minutes, your head starts to get into it in anticipation of that. And then it's another 5 minutes after that where you're processing that information. So really took a minute, it's only 15 minutes. Don, that's only one time. Yeah, but they don't only do it one time. And they're doing it like once an hour. And you can see what a huge drain that has on productivity. So I'd ask you to kind of take a look at that and see if you can kind of tighten that up. And then we got time for this one last one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one more.
One final thief. And it has to do with the 2 rules that you were given when you were born. And rule number 1 is you got to get it all done. That was rule 1. When you were born, you got to drink all of mama's milk, and later on you've got to do all your homework, and you've got to do all your practice, and you've got to do flip all the burgers, okay? Because you got a ton of stuff that you got to get done. So when you get your title certificate on age 18, you can function. Rule number 2, it comes maybe 8-9 months. And that's when you learn language, and you learn how to say the most powerful word is no. And I see my little granddaughter do this, and you know, the things that they want the most, and you say, would you like ice cream or a candy or whatever? You know they want it, and they look up and say no in a very defiant way, and I'm the grandparent and I laugh, and that really annoys the parents, but I don't care because I send them back, okay? And that just annoys the parents, okay? And it is cute, but it's not appropriate because you can't say no because you don't know enough to say no. So we have to teach the child not to say no, to say yes. Say yes to your teachers, your coaches, and all that. Okay, so let's fast forward now. It's your 18th birthday. Remember that? It was wonderful. Everybody showed up. There was the cake, there was the party and all that. You opened up the cards. Even your aunt showed up, the one from Philadelphia, the one you hate, but she gave you $20, so she's okay now. And then there was that one more envelope that was from the government. You didn't get that? Oh, the government messed up, yeah. And that's the memo. The memo is the rules change when you turn 18. And the rule of getting it all done, can't do it anymore. Because as we advance, and this says a lot of good things about us, we all have too much to do. But if we all have too much to do, we're never going to get it all done. And rule number 2, that rule that says we can't say no, we got to say no. Because there are more demands on our time than what time allows. And one of the most powerful words in our time management vocabulary is the word no. And it doesn't have to be no, but it could be, look, I'm sorry, that's not a priority with me. I can't get to it now, but I can get to it later. You find the words that are comfortable. But the point being, if you're ever in a position where you can never say no, then you're always saying yes. And like the song says, if you stand for something, you're going to fall for everything. So we did promise we're going to leave some time for some questions. And Bob, what do we have over there for any questions coming in at this point?
Thanks. We are going to use the next couple of minutes for questions. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you could submit them through the chat feature. It's at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that button, and you could submit your questions there. We'll take as many as we can up until the end of the time here. And maybe while we're just waiting for some of these questions to come in, I can start off and say, I'm sure you get a number of people come in that are absolutely overwhelmed, and you made the point of just doing little changes. Where do you find the most effective changes come the fastest? Are there any things that people can do to get the early hits or the early successes in organizing their time?
Well, it's a function of those 7 vital areas where you start. It could be a simple little thing like weight control, and I actually experienced this myself. And trying to cut down on things, I have a slice of pie every night after dinner, and that's 250 calories. So I'm going to make a small change. I'll just not have the pie tomorrow, a little extra exercise or something. And it does take about a month or so, doesn't it, to create a new physical or emotional habit, okay? So it kind of starts with that. But the idea of changing our behavior is a difficult thing for all of us, because we are change averse. We like our comfort zones. They're secure. And to consider change at all, if you do it in small amounts and try not to do too many things at the same time, you're going to have increased success. I know in our seminars, people come through and they get all these ideas. They come through the seminar and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and they're going to go in 20 different directions, and it just kind of blows up in your face after a few days. Small little incremental changes, establish them as habits, and spoon feed them as you go forward.
Okay, that's great. Very very helpful. Question from Rose on whether the PowerPoint will be available. Rose, it will be available on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And Don, I'm sure you'll like this question. He's also asking for the names of some of your other books.
Thank you, Rose, for the question. They're available at the best way to get them is on Amazon. I have 4 books listed on there. I'd point out 2 that might be of interest. One is called Organizing Your Life, and the second one is called the Productivity Handbook.
Okay, that's great. We have a question from Paul. Don, can you comment on planning long-running projects over time? Many of my work and family challenges involve large projects with multi-day, week time commitments. Sometimes it's hard to chunk these up and feel like you're making progress. And it's easy to over-prioritize one looming project over all others.
Boy, isn't that the case? I think of time managers as being good project managers, and that's not my field, but I understand how they work. But let's think in terms of building a building, okay? and you want to build a home. All right, and it starts with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would teach us. And so what's that house going to be like? And you engage an architect and the design and rooms and the utility and design, all of that stuff. So that's the final picture. Then what do? We start to work our way backwards. What do we have to do in order to get there? And then it gets involved in zoning and this and that and the other, and hiring an attorney, and we're down to now what the next step might be. And following that little reverse process, maybe the first step is I need to contact a real estate professional to show me property, or I need to speak to a muffin man because I don't have enough information. But we always seem to know we will always figure out what the next step is as we go back, work our way backwards. When we've accomplished the next step, the first step, then that'll give rise to what the next step is. So for example, the initial step to get this process going, I want to have this beautiful home. I'd like to have it 2 years from today. I got in mind what the vision ought to be and all that sort of thing. I kind of work it back here. And the next step is I need to speak to a real estate agent. Well, I think I can get to that on Saturday. And on my list of things to do on Saturday, I might want to put down an action step. Call the XYZ real estate firm, or maybe go online and Zillow or something and look at it. But I have my next step there. And I make a phone call. I say, I'm interested in purchasing some land. I want to build a house. And the realtor, Susan, says, yes, I'm glad you called, and let's get together. So now we have an appointment on Sunday. And then the next step is we're going to go out and see some property, and it'll take its own course. The difficulty that we often do is we try to schedule out every single step along the way, which is useful in project management. I understand that, but it does become overwhelming. Get the first step first, and then the second and third steps, and everything will fall into place.
That's great. Very helpful. We do have a couple more minutes if people want to submit any questions. And we do have one here from Elliot. What are your thoughts on beating yourself up?
There we go. I don't think that's a good idea. You are who you are. My wife has this beautiful thing on the refrigerator, I am me. And it kind of deals with that. And yeah, I mess up on things, I do this, but I am me. And we are all productive people in our own right. We accomplish wonderful things. Everybody's different. There's no need to be negative about yourself. There's too much of that in the real world. You don't need to compete with that. And there's surveys out there about, and you see this on Google, the number of thoughts we have in a day. And the average person has 60, 70,000 different thoughts during the day. That's how our heads work all over. And the majority of those thoughts are negative thoughts. The I's, the to's, the yes buts. I feel shy, and poor me, self-pity, and the blame game and all of that. Easier said than done, but you get enough of that on your own from the outside. I go to bed every night and I go through those 7 vital areas. And this is absolutely true. And I just do a summary of the good things that I did in each and every one of those. And as a person of faith, I thank God for the opportunity to live that day. That's how I end my day.
Thanks, Don. Very helpful. And that's all the time we have questions for today. Once again, a reminder that a recording of the webinar and the materials are available within a couple of days on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And you can get them when you go to the website. Just go to on-demand webinars, and they'll be there, the slides and the recording of Don's talk. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today, Tuesday, November the 19th at noon. The topic is Marketing the E-commerce Business with Cliff Enico presenting. And again, you can see on our on the screen here that if you would like free mentoring, you can either go to our website or to the link that you see on the screen and request a mentor. I would also like to ask you to please fill out your evaluations that you'll receive as soon as you sign off today. They're very helpful for us going forward. On behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's SCORE live webinar. And in closing, a big thank you to Don Wetmore for presenting today. And have a nice day, everyone.